Have you noticed an uptick in senior care facilities popping up all around? Or maybe it's just me because I frequent these places as a geriatric physical therapist. This is where you will find me on any given day if I'm not on a field, a court, a track, watching my kids. For families just beginning to navigate this world of senior care, it can be confusing and overwhelming, and that's what I want to help you sort out today. So I'm going to give you an overview of what to expect and the differences in various senior care facilities, such as independent living, assisted living, residential care homes, nursing homes, and memory care facilities. So let's begin with independent living. In independent living, you cannot expect for your loved one to get any assistance with their mobility or activities of daily living like dressing and bathing and that sort of thing. So if they are pretty independent with all of that, it may be a good fit. Most of these places, they will provide 1, maybe 2 meals a day, or they may have an allotment of you get so many meals per month with your monthly rent. So you'd want to check into that. Most of these places, the person's going to want to keep some food in the refrigerator with a microwave, be able to safely warm up food and that sort of thing. It is typically not a 3 meal a day type of situation. So you just want to check. They all do vary. So you want to see what that looks like if you're visiting some of these type of places. A great benefit to independent living is most are pretty heavy on the social and community aspect. So if that is of importance to you for your loved one or for them, they are saying I need more socialization. Maybe, things have changed in their life and they've just moved from a home. Sometimes they've been in for many, many years. Possibly they are widowed and alone. And to have that community aspect, you'll want to check and see what are the activities like here? What kind of, things do they do? That is important. Also, they may not be driving anymore. Sometimes people can still drive and some don't. But the benefit is they typically have transportation to the grocery store a couple times a week, definitely to some medical appointments if it's within a certain radius. So those are, perks and benefits of being in an independent living versus just a regular apartment. Another thing I find pretty critical to look at as a physical therapist and also as someone who we just moved my mother-in-law into an independent living facility, I find very important, and they are not all created equal. So find out if they have some type of system to check on your loved one every day. Again, they don't provide assistance, but many of them will have some kind of signal that yes, this person woke up and they are up for the day. Maybe it's something on their outer door that they have to turn, or a magnet. I've seen different things, but some system in place so that you have peace of mind that your loved one has awoken for the day and that they're okay. I've had way too many patients lay on the floor from a fall for days. And that is a brutal, miserable thing. That to me would be of utmost importance when you're looking into these places. All right, that brings us to assisted living. All right, so here's the key differences in an assisted living versus that independent living situation. In an assisted living facility, there are caregivers 24/7. They should be able to help your loved one bathe, get dressed if needed. They provide 3 meals a day. If they need a little help with mobility, maybe it's wheeling their wheelchair or just helping them get up and out of bed or out of the chair. Those things are pretty standard. Definitely medication management. Also laundry. And oftentimes these things I just mentioned, they're kind of a la carte. Some places have it in different tiers of levels of care. And of course the cost goes up with each level of care or a la carte need or service that you add on. But it's just something to consider, is looking at what is the safety and the real needs and necessities of your loved one. Most of them are going to have housekeeping once a week. Light housekeeping comes in. The trash should be taken out every day. They also provide transportation to medical appointments within a certain radius, of course, and the community aspect there too. So I believe that a good community with a great activity director is going to have a lot going on in that building. Entertainment, activities, on-site exercise classes, that sort of thing. All right, a residential care home. These are maybe, I would say, a relatively new concept. You may or may not even have heard of. You don't notice them from the street. And the reason is because they're just a house. It's just a regular house. You may have one right next door to you in your neighborhood, or you may drive past one every day and not know it. So a residential care home is just that. It is a home. Now you're going to want to make sure it is licensed and certified. Typically they're only going to have maybe 6 to 10 residents, depending on how big it is and how many caregivers they have there. So there's typically a house manager and maybe 1 to 2 caregivers depending on census. This is round the clock care. And I also should mention it should be secured and locked down. Nobody should be able to come in and out without being let in or let out. Typically a resident who is going to fit in here is someone who has a degree of physical and or cognitive impairment. These people need some help, quite a bit of help typically in one or both of those areas. And I think the nice thing is it kind of has that comfy, homey feel. You're in a house. And also the staff typically cooks every meal. So they utilize that kitchen. They're cooking, homemade food and everything like that. So that is just something to consider. You may have to really search those out, and using the term residential care home or residential senior care home might be a good way to search for that. A nursing home. All right, you're gonna see a very broad spectrum of folks in a nursing home. You may see people who are totally bedridden and need 100% total care, to people who are walking around with their walker and maybe they just have some cognitive impairment that isn't blatantly obvious. Most nursing homes are going to accept Medicaid, and you just have to talk to the director there or the marketing person to figure out what that looks like case by case. Also, most of them are going to have an in-house skilled therapy department. Your loved one, if they're in this environment, they may qualify for some therapy from time to time, maybe if they've had like a hospitalization or they've had a decline in their status. And so maybe they can receive some therapy on site there periodically. That brings us to memory care. So I see a huge increase in memory care facilities being built, or maybe like an assisted living, an existing assisted living that is adding on or turning a part of their building into memory care because of the demand for it. We are seeing such an increase in cases of dementia and Alzheimer's. There are waiting lists. It is really, really, for lack of a better term, kind of outrageous, the amount of dementia that we're seeing, and therefore memory care places. These facilities are typically reserved for those people with pretty advanced stages of dementia and cognitive decline. Most people here are going to need quite a bit of help with what we call ADLs, or activities of daily living, such as bathing, dressing, feeding. Maybe not everybody needs help feeding, but a lot of people do. And even with mobility, you're going to see maybe some are still quite mobile by themselves, but many may be now wheelchair bound. We are not safe to walk, or we just can't. So that cognitive piece plays a big role when the connection doesn't get there in your walking, in your mobility. A memory care facility must be secured and locked down. So we do not want someone with cognitive impairment to be what we would call like a flight risk and leave. That could be a super dangerous situation. You see the alerts, I'm sure a lot, the silver alerts and things for elderly people who have, gotten lost and they can't find their way back. Now, there are many people whom I call cuspers. All right, they are on the cusp of whether they can manage in independent living or do we need assisted care, right? Assisted living. The tricky thing for families trying to make decisions in this situation is that there's no exact recipe for what to do. So I'm going to try to provide some guidance here and offer some questions that you just want to ask yourself pertaining to your loved one when you're trying to make these big, important decisions. And also costly. I will mention that because the difference in independent and assisted living is quite a bit. So these are also costly decisions, but we want to also make safe decisions. So here are some questions. If you want to scribble these down, take some notes that I would offer in my experience. All right, number 1. Does my loved one need help bathing and or getting dressed? Number 2. Can they administer their own medication? Number 3. Do they need 2 to 3 meals prepared for them per day, cleaned up, etc.? Or can they warm up some, light meals, make a sandwich, that type of thing? Number 4, are they independently using a walker or a wheelchair for mobility? Like, can they get from point A to point B safely with a walker or wheeling the wheelchair themselves? Number 5, have they had any falls? And if so, what's the frequency of this? Did they hurt themselves really badly? Or was it maybe just one little fluke thing where they slid to the floor and it's not a common occurrence? And number 6, what is their cognitive ability and do they jeopardize their safety in everyday life? How you answer these questions should help point you in a direction and help you navigate this whole new world. Now, I want to offer also a few things to consider if you're going to visit some of these places or even just with phone calls. If you're calling around and asking a lot of questions, maybe you're long distance from that person and you can't just go visit around, some things based on my experience that I would just ask or look for if you are in the facility, right? Is it clean? How does it smell? See what that vibe is. Also, speaking of vibes, what is the vibe if you are physically able to go in person? What's the vibe when you walk in? Is it friendly? Or is the staff friendly? Do you see caregiving staff? That to me, if you're able to go and observe, do you see people in the halls and able, ready to assist? Or are you like having to an impossibility to track somebody down? What is the activity calendar like? Is there a good activity director there that has a lot on the calendar? That doesn't mean your loved one has to do everything, but it gives them a lot of choices. Entertainment, activities, exercise classes, that's a big one. So, and do the staff members and the activity director kind of help encourage them to come down and socialize and participate in those things, right? Okay. Also, I would just ask, how long has the executive director been there? Also, the director of nursing, probably the director of marketing. There's a lot of turnover in caregiving staff in these places. I think that's just a given anymore. But some of your admin people, I would just want to know. And things happen and things change, but it's just a question. And it's not a deal breaker in my opinion, but it's maybe just something I would want to know. So I'm sure I'm forgetting so many things, but those would be a few just to test the waters when you're there. Keep in mind that, like most things in life, no place is perfect. But this is just a guideline to help you find a place that most aligns with what you are seeking and that you would feel comfortable and at peace with if your loved one lived there. Now, please drop any questions you may have or share your own experiences in the comments as we can all benefit from each other. Also, If you are currently on a journey with having a loved one with dementia, I highly recommend a book called Days Remembered by Jill Bement. She is a seasoned occupational therapist, and we will link her book in our show notes in the description. Thank you for joining me today. And if you found Healthful Connections here, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend or a loved one.